Well, we continue looking at the book of Genesis, God's covenant with Noah. I remember once a CCD teacher asked her second grade class if anybody knew the name of Noah's wife. And one little boy said, I think her name was Joan of Arc. What a clever little boy. So we look at this covenant with Noah. God said that I will never again destroy the earth by water. And for this reason, I will give you a sign that I will always be faithful to my covenant. And that sign, of course, is the bow in the skies, the rainbow, which represents God's covenant agreement with Noah. What is a covenant? It is a sacred bond, a sacred agreement. When men and women get married, it's not just a contract, it's a sacred covenant. And so in the Old Testament, there are 5 covenants. There are partnerships, relationships, agreements between God and the human race. The first covenant was with Adam, the Adamic covenant with Adam and Eve, and it was made between God and a couple, between God and a married couple, Adam and Eve. And what was the sign of that covenant? It was the Sabbath day. God said, work on 6 days, but keep the Sabbath as a holy day, a day of worship, and a day of rest. The second covenant we heard about in today's first reading. And this was a covenant with Noah and his family. So notice the first covenant was with a couple, and now it expands to be a covenant with the family, with Noah's family. And what is the sign of that covenant? It is the rainbow. The third covenant in the Old Testament was with Abram, who became Abraham. And now God makes a covenant with even a larger group, with a tribe. So it goes from a couple to a family, now to a tribe, the Jewish people. What was the sign of their covenant? It was circumcision, that they would be separated from the Gentiles. So they would receive this mark of circumcision that would separate them from the pagans and other tribes and from the nations. So God chose them as his special people. Then we get the fourth covenant. This was made with Moses, and this is now with a nation. So we've moved from a couple to a family to a tribe, and now to a nation, the nation of Israel. And what is the sign of this covenant? It is the Passover. They would take the blood of the lamb and place it on the doorpost, and the angel of death would pass over and not slay the firstborn child. And this was a covenant that led them from slavery in Egypt into the promised land. Then the last covenant, the fifth Old Testament covenant, is with David. And now this is made with the kingdom. And so now God is making another covenant with David. And what is the sign of this covenant? That the Messiah would be from his descendant, from his line, the line of David, that the Messiah would come. Sadly, the human race was not faithful to their end of the bargain, whether it be Adam or even Noah, Abraham, Moses, and David. They all sinned or disobeyed in some way, and yet God always remained faithful to his part of the bargain, to his covenant. And God fulfilled his promise that he would send the Messiah. And he actually sent his only beloved Son, much greater than we could ever have imagined. The Messiah was not just a prophet or a great teacher. He was God, the eternal Son of God, the second person of the Blessed Trinity. And at the Last Supper, Jesus gives the last and final covenant. He says, I give you the cup of my blood, the blood of the new and everlasting covenant. It's the only time in the New Testament where Jesus uses the word covenant, and that is at the Last Supper when he gives his body and blood. So you and I get incorporated into the covenant through baptism, no longer through circumcision, but baptism has replaced that to become a member of God's family. And so we are baptized, we become part of God's new covenant in Christ, and then he feeds us with his body and blood, the Eucharist, as the new and everlasting covenant. And we're so blessed to have the 7 sacraments, confession, reconciliation, which grafts us back into friendship with God so we can continue to be holy. So baptism, the Eucharist, the sacraments, that is this new and everlasting covenant that God has given to his people, foreshadowed in the Old Testament through the Old Testament covenants, but completed and brought to perfection in Jesus Christ, the Son of God.